Imagine, if you will, a teenager today, like let's say a 17-year-old high school junior.
Okay.
They walk right through the front doors of the Pentagon, march straight into a war room filled with, seasoned four-star generals who have been fighting this grinding, losing war for decades, and they make a demand.
Oh, boy.
They tell the top brass to step aside and put them in charge of the entire armed forces. And their only credential, a dream they had.
That is, it sounds like the plot of a really terrible fantasy movie.
Right. But here's the truly insane part. Imagine the generals actually step aside. The teenager gets the job, and then they go out and actually win the war.
It completely defies all military doctrine, all logic, and frankly, just all common sense.
Totally defies logic. But that is exactly what we're looking at today. Welcome to our deep dive into the astonishing life, death, and frankly, the unbelievable enduring legacy of Joan of Arc.
Yeah, it's a wild story.
It really is. And we are pulling together a really diverse stack of materials for you today. We're looking at detailed historical encyclopedias, some really fascinating theological reflections from Pope Benedict XVI, and we are even exploring the architecture of the Church of St. Joan of Arc in Buffalo, New York.
Which is a massive collection of material to sift through.
Yeah.
Because Joan is arguably one of the most heavily documented figures of the entire Middle Ages.
Yeah, we have so much on her.
We do. We don't just have myths. We have actual trial transcripts, eyewitness testimonies, and, royal decrees.
And that is exactly our mission today. We are going to use those documents to strip away the centuries of myth. We want to understand how an illiterate peasant girl fundamentally altered the map of Europe, and why, 600 years later, her image remains one of the most fiercely contested symbols in the world.
Exactly.
But to really grasp how impossible her story is, we have to set the stage for you. We are in 15th century France, and things are bleak.
Bleak is almost an understatement. France is completely fractured by the 100 Years' War with England.
Right.
But it's not just a straightforward foreign invasion. It is a bitter, bloody civil war, too. You have two French factions just tearing the country apart. The Armagnacs, who support the French royal heir, and the Burgundians.
And the Burgundians have essentially allied themselves with the invading English, right?
Yes, exactly. They've teamed up with the English.
And the economy is completely devastated. To make matters worse, the previous French king, Charles VI, suffered from severe mental illness. And his own wife ended up signing away their son's inheritance to the English king.
Yeah, the country is just exhausted. They are starving for a miracle.
And that miracle supposedly arrives in the form of a young girl from Domremy, which is this tiny, insignificant village on the eastern border of France.
Born around 1412. So Joan was the daughter of a peasant farmer. She couldn't read or write a single word, but she was highly skilled at sewing and spinning.
Right.
And the records consistently point out that from a very young age, she was known in her village for being exceptionally pious.
But then, at age 13, everything flips. She starts hearing voices.
All right, the visions.
Yeah. She sees visions of St. Michael the Archangel, accompanied by a host of angels, and then later St. Catherine and St. Margaret. And what's wild is that these aren't just vague, comforting spiritual promptings.
Yeah, not at all.
These visions are handing her a highly specific geopolitical checklist. They tell her to save France and get the Dauphin Charles VII crowned at Reims.
And we should probably clarify for a second. The Dauphin is essentially the title for the uncrowned heir to the French throne.
Got it.
At this point, Charles VII is sitting in exile. He's doubting his own legitimacy, just watching his country burn. But what's really fascinating here is the specific cultural climate Joan steps into.
Like she didn't just appear in a vacuum.
Exactly. There were already these centuries-old prophecies circulating in the French countryside. People were whispering about a virgin from an oak wood who would arise to save a France that had been ruined by a woman.
And everyone assumed that ruinous woman was the Dauphin's mother, Isabeau of Bavaria, the one who signed his inheritance away.
Precisely. Joan fits this prophetic mold perfectly. It's a masterful intersection of timing, public desperation, and, her own unwavering conviction.
So in 1429, she makes this incredibly treacherous journey through enemy territory to the Armagnac court at Chinon. She demands an audience with Charles VII.
Which is bold enough on its own.
Right. And he decides to test her. He hides himself in the crowd of courtiers wearing plain clothes, but she walks right up to him. Then she reveals a secret sign to him.
And historians generally agree this secret sign was a supernatural reassurance regarding his deepest insecurity, his legitimacy.
Oh, wow.
She essentially confirmed to him that he was the true Legitimate heir to the throne, not a bastard as his enemies claimed.
Okay, let's unpack this right here, because as a modern listener, you really have to wonder about the Dauphin's gullibility.
Sure.
It's the ultimate imposter syndrome for Charles. Yeah, and Joan is essentially handing him a divine permission slip. But why on earth would he hand over an actual army to a teenager based on one secret conversation? It sounds like blind, desperate faith.
It totally sounds like that. But it wasn't blind faith at all. Charles had her heavily vetted.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He didn't just hand her a sword and point her toward the English. He sent her to the city of Poitiers to be interrogated for weeks by a committee of learned theologians and bishops.
So they were actively trying to poke holes in her story.
Exactly. They peppered her with theological traps.
Yeah.
But it went beyond just theology. Charles's mother-in-law, Yolande of Aragon, she directed a formal physical examination by women of the court to verify Joan's virginity.
Wait, a formal state-sponsored virginity test? Why was that so critical to military strategy?
Because of medieval geopolitics and theology. In the 15th century mindset, female purity was seen as a literal conduit for divine truth.
Oh, I see.
They had to ensure she was exactly who she claimed to be, the prophesied pure maiden. More importantly, they had to prove she wasn't a fraud or consorting with demons.
Because of the political fallout.
Right. If Charles accepts military victory from a heretic or a witch, the English and Burgundians will instantly use that to invalidate his crown.
That makes total sense. Because if you give an army to a witch, you're essentially proving God is against you.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Joan's arrival fundamentally shifted the very nature of the conflict.
How so?
Before Joan, this was a grinding, dynastic squabble over land inheritance. Once the theologians in the court cleared her, Joan transformed the 100 Years' War into a religious holy war.
Wow.
Her virginity became a powerful political weapon. It suddenly meant the creator of the universe was explicitly endorsing the French cause.
Which brings us to a period that Pope Benedict XVI refers to in his reflections as her year of action.
Yes.
She passes the vetting. The Dauphin equips her with a magnificent suit of white plate armor. She retrieves an ancient sword from behind an altar in a local church, and she designs her own battle banner.
It's so cinematic.
It really is. And in April 1429, she rides straight to the siege of Orléans.
And we really have to understand how desperate Orléans was. It was the strategic linchpin of France. If it fell, the rest of Charles's territory would easily follow.
It was a make-or-break moment.
Absolutely. The French forces trapped inside were completely demoralized. It wasn't just a battle. It was a grueling, miserable, half-year stalemate of mud and starvation.
And Joan shows up, and she doesn't just, sit in the back giving inspirational speeches from a safe distance. She is in the thick of the violence.
She's right there on the front lines.
Right. During a massive assault on an English fortress called Les Tourelles, she takes a crossbow bolt right between the neck and the shoulder.
An incredibly brutal, agonizing wound. I mean, for anyone else, that's the end of the campaign.
But she refuses to quit. She gets the wound dressed, returns to the trench with her banner, and drives the French forces into a final successful assault.
It's unbelievable.
9 days. 9 days after this teenager arrives, the English completely abandon a siege they had maintained for over 6 months.
The psychological impact of that cannot be overstated. Following Orléans, Joan just pushes relentlessly.
She doesn't let up.
No, she ignores the cautious advice of older generals and demands the Loire campaign, urging this really aggressive pursuit of the retreating English. And this culminates in the Battle of Patay.
What happens there?
The French vanguard detects an English ambush and completely routs their army. It shatters the myth of English invincibility and opens the path directly to Reims.
And in July 1429, the ultimate mission her voices gave her is fulfilled. She stands by the altar with her banner as Charles VII is solemnly crowned King of France.
Mission accomplished.
Just put yourself in the shoes of those seasoned French commanders for a second. You've been fighting this war your entire adult life, mostly losing, and suddenly you are being ordered around by a teenage girl who completely ignores traditional military caution, demands direct frontal assaults, and is somehow miraculously winning every single time.
It must have been awe-inspiring, but deeply humbling.
Oh, for sure.
But we also have to view this psychological shock through the lens of the enemy. The very success that proved her holiness to the French guaranteed that the English would seek her absolute destruction.
Right, because they can't admit they're just getting out-strategized by a peasant girl.
Exactly. To the English establishment, a girl decimating their elite forces wasn't proof of God's favor. It was undeniable proof of demonic possession.
They had to spin the narrative.
They had to frame her as an agent of hell to rationalize their own massive defeats.
And that perspective becomes deadly as her momentum stalls. Because after the coronation, Joan wants to strike Paris immediately to finish the job. But King Charles starts dragging his feet.
He hesitates.
Yeah, he decides to play politics, prioritizing diplomatic truces with the Burgundians. By the time they finally do assault Paris in September, the English are ready. The attack fails.
It's a disaster.
Joan is shot in the thigh with a crossbow bolt, and the king actually orders the army to retreat.
The divine momentum is officially broken, which transitions her narrative into what Pope Benedict XVI calls her year of passion.
The tone completely changes.
Exactly. The era of battlefield tactics abruptly ends, and a brutal legal and theological chess match begins.
In May 1430, while she's trying to relieve the besieged town of Compiègne, Joan is physically pulled from her horse and captured by the Burgundians.
A terrible moment.
They hold her prisoner for a few months, and then, for a massive ransom, they sell her to the English. She is taken to Rouen, which is the English headquarters in France, and put on trial for heresy.
And we need to be very, very clear about this trial. It was a masterpiece of political maneuvering disguised as ecclesiastical justice.
It was rigged.
Completely. It was orchestrated by Bishop Pierre Cauchon, who was a French cleric, sure, but one who was a fierce, paid partisan of the English cause. He's essentially running a kangaroo court.
The deck is stacked against her from day one. I mean, she's a teenager facing dozens of the most learned, highly educated clerics from the University of Paris.
Intimidating, to say the least.
And she is completely denied legal counsel. And crucially, they violate their own church law. For a heresy trial, the rules state she should be held in a church prison guarded by women. Instead, she is held in a secular military prison, kept in heavy iron chains, and guarded day and night by hostile male English soldiers.
They wanted to break her psychologically.
Okay.
But despite the exhaustion, the isolation, and just the relentless daily interrogations, her mental agility was astonishing.
It really was.
The trial transcripts survive today, and they read like a masterclass in cross-examination. We see her constantly outmaneuvering men who had spent their entire lives studying theology.
There is this one incredible moment in the records where they try to catch her with a trick question. It's a complete theological bear crap. They ask her, "Do you know if you are in God's grace?"
Right, and for context, church doctrine at the time strictly held that no mortal human could ever be absolutely certain they were in a state of grace.
Ah, okay.
So if Joan answers yes, she is claiming divine knowledge, which is instant heresy. If she answers no, she is confessing her own guilt and damnation.
It's total lose-lose.
Exactly.
But Joan just looks at these elite scholars and says, "If I am not, may it please God to put me in it. If I am, may it please God to keep me there."
It's a brilliant, flawless answer. One of the court notaries actually testified years later that the interrogators were completely stunned into silence by that response. They literally had no idea what to say next.
Because they can't catch her on complex theology, the trial is forced to fixate heavily on something entirely physical: her clothing.
Yes, the clothing issues.
From the time she originally traveled to Chinon, Joan wore men's clothing: a doublet, hose, boots, armor. She even cut her hair short, and she kept wearing this male attire in the military prison.
And her reasoning for this was entirely practical, which she explicitly stated on the record. Initially, it was for warfare and riding horses. But in prison, surrounded by male guards who hated her, she wore men's clothing specifically to protect her modesty and to deter sexual assault.
That makes total sense in that environment.
The medieval male garments featured these cords that tightly laced the hose to the doublet, making them much, much harder to forcefully remove than a traditional dress.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Focusing on her clothes is basically like prosecuting Al Capone for tax evasion.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Right. The English couldn't legally execute her just for beating them on the battlefield. That's just war.
Exactly.
And they couldn't trap her in a theological heresy because she was too smart. So they fixated on this visible, undeniable violation of 15th century social norms, cross-dressing as a convenient pretext.
They needed something tangible.
They used a wardrobe violation to mask their deep existential political fear of her.
And Pope Benedict's reflection on this specific aspect of the trial is deeply poignant. He points out that these powerful, learned theologians were entirely blinded by their own political allegiances.
They couldn't see past their bias.
Right. They possessed the intellectual knowledge of God, but they completely lacked the charity and humility required to see the genuine grace working through this young woman. The trial wasn't a search for truth. It was profound institutional failure of the very men sworn to uphold justice.
And that failure concludes in the most tragic way possible. Under the terrifying threat of being burned alive, exhausted, and sick, Joan briefly submits. She signs a retraction and agrees to wear a dress.
It's heartbreaking.
But just days later, the judges return to her cell to find her back in men's clothes. The historical records strongly suggest her guards may have deliberately taken her dress away to force the issue, or, she had been attacked and needed the physical protection of the laced clothing again.
We don't know for sure, but the result is the same.
Regardless of the reason, Bishop Cauchon seizes the opportunity. She is immediately declared a relapsed heretic.
Which is the fatal blow. The penalty for a relapsed heretic is to be handed over to the secular authorities for execution.
On May 30th, 1431, at just 19 years old, Joan of Arc is burned at the stake in the old marketplace of Rouen. As the flames rise, she asks to see a cross. An English soldier takes pity and makes one for her out of 2 sticks. She dies gazing at a processional cross held high by a local priest, repeatedly calling out the name of Jesus. And just to ensure that nobody could ever claim her remains as holy relics, the English scoop up her ashes and throw them into the Seine River.
They wanted it to completely erase her from the earth. But, well, the story obviously doesn't end in the ashes. Because while they killed the girl, her execution created a massive, lingering political liability for the man she crowned, Charles VII.
Exactly. Fast forward 24 years, the French military has finally turned the tide for good. The English are largely expelled from the continent.
A huge shift.
Charles VII is totally secure on his throne, but he has this massive, nagging PR problem. His divine right to rule, the very coronation that solidified his power, was orchestrated by a convicted, condemned heretic. He desperately needs to erase that stain from his legacy.
So we see the initiation of the rehabilitation trial, which spans from 1455 to 1456. Now, this wasn't just a local royal review. It was officially authorized by Pope Calixtus III and driven by the Inquisitor General of France, alongside Joan's own surviving mother, Isabelle Romay.
Her mother actually stood up in Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris and delivered this incredibly impassioned, heartbreaking plea to clear her daughter's name.
I can't even imagine that scene.
Over the course of the trial, they interviewed about 115 witnesses. Villagers who remembered her as a child, grizzled soldiers who fought beside her, and even clerics who confessed to participating in the rigged original trial.
A very thorough investigation.
Ultimately, the new court completely nullified the original verdict, declaring it tainted by fraud, deceit, and malice.
It was a complete exoneration.
But, okay, I have to stop you there and push back on this.
Sure.
Knowing how medieval politics works, was this retrial truly a noble quest for truth and justice to clear a brave girl's name? Or was this just a massive, cynical, state-sponsored PR campaign to legitimize Charles VII's crown after the fact?
It is entirely valid to be skeptical. And the reality is that the retrial was absolutely politically motivated by the king's needs.
It had to be.
But we shouldn't let that cynical origin overshadow the monumental significance of the outcome. The Inquisition basically investigated itself and revoked its own death sentence.
That is huge.
That is a massive institutional pivot. What we are seeing here is the fascinating reality of how historical truth is negotiated and cemented by the victors who survive. Yes, the retrial conveniently cleared the king's name, but in doing so, it permanently secured Joan's legacy from the label of heresy.
And it's wild how securing her legacy legally back then essentially opened the floodgates for everyone to claim a piece of her today. Because she is completely undefined by traditional categories, she becomes this universal mirror. Let's look at how she's viewed now.
Let's do it.
Theologically, she was officially canonized as a saint in 1920. Pope Benedict VI views her as a profound model of what he calls Christocentric and Marian spirituality.
Meaning, her entire daily life and ultimate mission were intensely focused on a deep personal obedience to Christ and a reliance on the Virgin Mary. She didn't just fight, she prayed constantly.
Right.
She deeply influenced much later figures, like Saint Therese of Lisieux, who felt a profound connection to Joan's total surrender of her own will.
But right alongside that reverent theological legacy is a fierce, ongoing scientific debate. Modern scholars and doctors have spent decades trying to retroactively diagnose the biological source of her voices.
The medical theories.
Yeah. We see clinical theories ranging from temporal lobe epilepsy to schizophrenia, or even bovine tuberculosis contracted from drinking unpasteurized milk on the farm.
But we have to be incredibly careful here. Trying to apply the modern DSM, the standard diagnostic manual used by psychiatrists today, to 600-year-old inquisitorial transcripts, is methodologically flawed.
Why is that?
The records were designed by hostile judges looking to prove demonic influence, not by objective doctors charting neurological symptoms.
That is a great point. Then, of course, there is her political legacy. And it's vital we state clearly to you listening. We are not taking sides here. We are just looking at how her image is utilized as a tool.
An important disclaimer.
Joan of Arc has literally been claimed by every single side of the French political spectrum. During World War II, she was used as a symbol of strict national authority by the collaborationist Vichy regime.
Yet at the exact same time, Charles de Gaulle was invoking her name in London as the ultimate model for the free French resistance against occupation. Even the communist resistance fighters in France used her as a symbol of a working-class peasant uprising against the elite. And if you look at France today, she is frequently utilized by the modern far-right National Front as a symbol of fierce nationalism and anti-foreign sentiment.
She is a blank canvas. If an era values obedience, they see a pious martyr. If they value feminist autonomy, they see a woman who defied a patriarchal church and military. Because her legacy is so intensely contested, you can actually see people trying to literally cement their specific version of her into the physical world. Just look at the Church of St. Joan of Arc in Buffalo, New York.
It's a brilliant architectural manifestation of this complex legacy. The entire physical structure of the building features these sweeping dramatic curves that are explicitly designed to evoke the roaring flames that consumed her at the stake.
But inside that fiery modern structure, it safely houses 13 beautiful 16th century Renaissance stained glass windows.
And where are they from?
These windows were originally located in a church in Rouen, the exact same city where she was interrogated and executed. They were saved from destruction during the bombing campaigns of the Second World War and brought to America.
That is incredible.
It creates this profound physical bridge between the tragic reality of her death and her enduring modern remembrance.
It really ties it all together.
So what does this all mean for you? Why are we still talking about a single, illiterate 15th century teenager? I think Joan's life is a masterclass in the sheer, undeniable power of absolute conviction.
Absolutely.
Whether you are prepping for a high-stakes boardroom presentation or you're just trying to navigate your way through our modern world of endless information overload and daily self-doubt, her story proves something incredible. It proves that a single voice, armed with unshakable belief, can literally dismantle the most entrenched, established power structures in the world.
She walked into a completely impossible situation, armed with absolutely nothing but her own certainty, and she changed the map of Europe forever.
Which leaves us with a lingering question to chew on today. We talked about the modern debates over her mind. Was it epilepsy? Was it trauma? Was it the literal voice of God? If Joan's entire mission was sparked by voices, and centuries later the church validated her innocence without ever strictly authenticating the specific medical or supernatural origin of her mind. Wait, sorry, let me rephrase that. If they validated her without proving the origin of her visions, does the actual biological source of our deepest convictions matter more than the undeniable world-changing reality of what those convictions compel us to achieve?
That is the ultimate question of intent versus impact.
Because at the end of the day, that teenager didn't just walk into the Pentagon and demand an army. She walked out with one, and she won. Thanks for diving deep with us.